Hey, this is Mike Robbins. Thanks so much for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Hope you're doing well, you, your team, your family, everyone around you. Today, I want to talk about relationships. I was having a conversation last week with someone that I've been working with and mentoring a bit. And I found myself saying to him as we were talking about the business, he happens to be in the same business that I'm in. I was saying to him, listen, it's all about relationships. In my experience of doing this over the last 25 years, as important as all the content is and the things that we write and the things that we speak about and all the different stuff that we put together, yeah, it's got to be relevant and useful to people, of course, but it's really all about relationships. And as I started to think more about that, not only do I think it's all about relationships with respect to doing what I do and, you know, managing client relationships and building the business of what I do specifically, but I really think most things in life, most things that matter to us, it's all about relationships, right? Whether we're talking about leadership or teamwork or performance, both of our teams and individually, even on an individual basis, when we're dealing with stress or change or goals or aspirations, it's what's my relationship to the thing I'm trying to accomplish or to the challenge I'm trying to overcome. Or even as I wrote about pretty extensively in my book many years ago, Nothing Changes Until You Do, the hardest and most important relationship many of us have is the relationship with ourselves. How do we talk to ourselves? How do we think about ourselves? How do we relate to ourselves? And with so much going on in the world right now and so much uncertainty and disruption politically, socially, economically, business wise, technologically, right? I mean, gosh, things are moving at such a pace, and artificial intelligence, as we all are starting to see and definitely hearing, is like going to change everything and how we do everything and how work's done and how we communicate and how life happens. And like, how are we relating to that? How do we relate to the disruption, the uncertainty that exists and that we're being told is going to continue to exist and come and impact us? So it's really all about relationships ultimately from my perspective. And while like, at some level I think we know that and we pay attention to that and we think about it, I think sometimes we forget and we get caught or distracted by a lot of things that can get in our way. But let's talk specifically about relationships today, relationships with others, relationship with ourselves, relationship to whatever we might be focused on, committed to, challenged by. But let's talk first about what can make relationships with others challenging. I mean, first thing is the pace, especially these days, right? So much is coming at us on text, on email, on Slack, on Teams, on LinkedIn, on Messenger, on you name that. There's so many different platforms for communication, which is great. So many more ways to connect with people, but it's often overwhelming. And we don't spend as much time in real time talking to people, right? We don't spend as much time on the telephone or in person having conversations or even on Zoom or Teams. We do spend a decent amount of time doing that, but it's like, even as we're doing that, how many of you find yourself multitasking communication? You're on a Zoom call and you're texting with your spouse, or, managing or responding to a message in Teams while you're on a Teams call, or doing, like we're just doing lots of things all at once. And the expectation is that we're always on, we're always communicating, we're always connecting. And I think as much as all of these platforms and all the devices that we have do allow us to communicate at scale more effectively and efficiently, I actually think it sometimes gets in the way of us really connecting and relating to each other. It can impede our actual relationships with other humans, right? I've heard people say, like, we have hundreds of friends on social media, but we don't have anybody who could feed our cat when we go out of town or take us to the airport. And again, this isn't a judgment on, each of us. And I mean, there is an epidemic of loneliness happening. So we know that that's real for people at all different ages and stages of life. But I think one of the big things that makes relationships challenging these days is just the sheer volume of communication and the expectation that we're constantly supposed to be connecting and communicating and responding to things. Another thing that makes relationships challenging is, again, we're separated by time and space. which has always been a bit of a challenge. But now, again, the expectation is that we're still in communication and relationship with people all over the country, all over the world, irrespective of whether we see them or not. But in general, even if we go back 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, right? Human beings are complicated. How many of you work with anyone who gets on your nerves? How many of you live with anyone who gets on your nerves? How many of you are raising children or dealing with grandchildren or nieces or nephews or aging parents or just people of all different types and backgrounds and personalities and stages of life and going through different things? Like, it's hard, right? Michelle and I have two daughters. Samantha's 19, Rosie's 16. Like, there's a lot happening for all four of us all the time, and we all love each other, but sometimes it's challenging to be in relationship with one another or to communicate effectively with one another. And those are the people that we're absolutely committed to. And like, we've raised these children. Michelle and I are about to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary next year. We've been together for almost 25 years. Like, I love these people, and those relationships can be challenging. But then it's like teammates, coworkers, people who report to us, the person we report to, customers, clients, prospects, in-laws, people at the Starbucks. I mean, just human beings in general. It's like, whoa, people have a lot of stuff going on. People are dealing with stress. People have different styles. People have different traumas. People have different ways of communicating and being. Like, it is complicated and at times quite messy being in relationship with other human beings. What to say, how to motivate, what to talk about, what are their hot buttons, what are their triggers, what are the sensitive things to talk. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence to manage our relationships effectively, right? What's emotional intelligence? Self-awareness and self-management, social awareness, relationship management. Easier said than done. How about our relationship with the things happening in our lives? The changes, the challenges, the goals, the ambitions, right? It's like so much of our effectiveness at being able to deal with whatever's going on, right? Change is happening. There's a reorg in the company. There's uncertainty in the market. Yes, those things are real, but our relationship to those things has a lot to do with how effective or ineffective we are at dealing with it. It's often not the change or the stress, it's our relationship to it. Right? Some companies, the fiscal year's ending at the end of June, the calendar will turn over and we'll start it new. Maybe you work for a company or in an industry or in an environment, or you run your business on an annual basis like I do and our team does. But in either case, it's like when we start the new year or the new quarter or the new month or whatever, if we're running a business or we're in some kind of sales or production role, it's like, how do I relate to the goals that I have that are given to me, the targets that I'm supposed to hit? And that doesn't even always mean sales, but again, it's less about the targets or the goals and more about our relationship to them. And sometimes our relationship to those things can be really challenged. Maybe I fell short of my goal last time. Maybe I don't like numbers. Maybe I get stressed about change and I'm uncomfortable with change or with uncertainty or with taking risks or whatever. And it's less about the circumstances and more about our relationship to it. Can we shift our mindset, our approach? And then, of course, there's our relationship with ourselves. Probably the most important human relationship that we have, and the one we spend the least amount of time really nurturing. Not that we're not thinking about ourselves, we often are, but we're not thinking about, how am I relating to myself? How can I be more kind, more compassionate, more loving, more accepting? How can I hold myself accountable in a healthy way? How can I challenge myself? How can I really nurture the relationship that I have with myself? That can seem weird. That can seem self-absorbed. When am I supposed to do that? That can seem selfish. Wait, I have all these people counting on me. I have this big job at work and all these direct reports, or I have a family at home, or I have aging parents or in-laws or people that's like, wait a minute, when am I supposed to take care of myself? When am I supposed to put the proverbial oxygen mask on first, as we all know is important, but we just forget to do that, or we don't do it in a way that really is conducive to our own well-being and to the nurturing of the relationships of the people around me. You know, my coach, my pitching coach from Stanford, Dean Stotts, who I've had here on the show before, used to always say to us when I was in college, and he still says it, like, the quality of your life is directly connected to the quality of your relationships. And he's right. Right? What really matters most to us is our relationships. When I talk to people about great teams? What makes a great team great? Which is a conversation I have all the time. What we often talk about is the intangible stuff, the human stuff. It's really about the relationships we have with other people. If you think of the best teams you've ever been a part of, I bet the relationships you have with the people on that team at the time, and even still now, if you're still connected with them, or maybe it's a team you're currently a part of, they're strong. They matter. I posted a few things on social media over the last week or so because it's the 30th anniversary of my Stanford baseball team winning our regional tournament in Wichita and qualifying for, advancing to the College World Series in Omaha. And if you're listening to this or watching this around the time that I post it, the NCAA baseball tournament is in full swing right now. And so I'm thinking about it, but I can't believe it's been 30 years since we were there in 1995. But I'm still on a group chat with some of my teammates. And here we all are, either late 40s, early 50s, like it's been 30 years, but reminiscing about that. And what I think most of us realize is, yeah, that experience was extraordinary and was fun. And we got to go and play in the College World Series and compete for a national championship and be on TV. And it happened to also coincide with, I got drafted by the Kansas City Royals that week. It was like one of the most exciting weeks of my life when we were in Omaha for the College World Series. But the thing that I remember most about that, and the thing that I miss most about that when I reflect on it, it's my teammates. It's being on the bus, it's being in the locker room, it's joking, it's celebrating after we won, it's hugging after we lost, it's the relationships. That's what makes a team great. Yeah, we have to have some talent and some skill and some execution, of course, but it's the relationships that really make great teams great. Leadership. You think about the best leader you've ever worked for or been around, or you think about what makes a great leader. It's not his or her intelligence necessarily, that's part of it, or his or her skills, that's also part of it. But you've probably worked for and been around people who are really smart and talented, but they weren't necessarily great leaders, or you didn't like being around them because there wasn't a strong relationship. And again, you don't have to be best friends with every leader that you have. And if you manage people, you don't have to be best friends with everybody on your team. But do we nurture those relationships in such a way that there's kindness, there's care, there's appreciation, there's authenticity, there's compassion baked into those relationships, a willingness to challenge one another, to bring out the best in each other? My friend Bronkar likes to say, he said this recently and it really resonated with me. He's like, I'm coachable from the right people. And when he said that, I was like, oh yeah, I'm incredibly coachable when the relationship is strong. If the right person is coaching me, so to speak, and they've nurtured the relationship with me, then I'll take their coaching, I'll take their feedback, I'll let them mentor me, guide me, even challenge me. But if they haven't invested the time and the energy to really build the relationship, I'm not taking their coaching. I don't care what their resume says. I don't care how impressive they are. And that's to think about. If you're a leader or a coach or a mentor to people, people might say yes to you or listen to you because they're supposed to. You're the boss, or you're in charge, or you have the resume to prove it, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have impact. And relating to the things going on around us, what can we do to keep things in perspective? Right? With all of the uncertainty going on in the world right now, politically, socially, economically, with everything happening technologically, with AI and other things, I've been constantly trying to talk to myself and remind myself, yes, this is new and different. Yes, I haven't been in this moment before, but I've been through quite a bit of change. I've been through quite a bit of uncertainty, disruption in my own life personally. Also, as a member of society, going through lots of things, especially over the last 5+ years with the pandemic. Oh my goodness. Like I have, and you have, and we all have navigated through incredibly uncertain times. And yeah, the ones that are happening in the moment are always the most vulnerable because we don't know how this story plays out. But what can we learn? What can I learn from experiences in the past where this has been the case? How can I keep things in perspective? Can I talk to some people who are older than me, who've been through more stuff than I've been through? Can I look back at history and remember, oh yeah, there's ebbs and flows, there's ups and downs, there's twists and turns. Like overreacting, freaking out usually doesn't serve us ever, but we tend to do it. And then our relationship with ourselves. What can we do to nurture the healthiest, most positive relationship with ourselves. One thing that I do, and I've shared this before on the show, but I'll just remind you, is I have two journals that I keep. One journal I just write about thoughts and feelings and what's going on, and another journal I actually write down 3 things that I'm grateful for each day and 3 things that I forgive myself for each day. Now, I do it almost every day, not every single day. I missed yesterday, although I did it again this morning. It's often part of my morning routine, my morning ritual. But doing that helps me nurture my mindset in terms of gratitude. What am I focused on? What am I paying attention to? But also self-compassion in terms of forgiving myself. Because I have a tendency, maybe you can relate to this, to be pretty hard on myself at times or be pretty critical of myself. And over time, as I've done this exercise more over several years, it hasn't magically eliminated all of my self-criticism, but it often creates a little more softness, a little more compassion, a little more appreciation for myself so that I'm not hanging up on things or holding a grudge against myself, if you will, which we have a tendency to do. We're often the meanest to ourselves. So that relationship with ourselves, it's not selfish to nurture that. It's actually healthy and important. And by the way, the kinder and more compassionate we are to ourselves, the more authentically kind and compassionate we can be to other people. So think about your life. Think about your work. Think about you as the center, not in some self-absorbed way, but you're the common denominator in all the situations and relationships in your life, right? You are, I am, we all are. It's all about relationships. So what can you do to enhance and nurture your professional relationships? Where are there some sweaty palm conversations maybe you've been avoiding that you could have that could bring you closer to some people around you? Where could you ask for help and support? Where could you offer help and support? Where could you reach out and check in with people? And tell the truth. Maybe there is a level of overwhelm that's happening right now for you in your life with all the things you have going on and all the different communication coming at you, but thinking about what you can do to nurture those relationships, both professionally, but also personally. And it's an ongoing process. It's not like we get to a point where like all my relationships are healthy, I'm done. No, it ebbs and it flows and it changes and it goes up and it goes down, and right? It's a dynamic process, which is beautiful. If you're in a place right now in life, either at work or at home or both, where some of your relationships are strained or they're challenging or they're painful, that's not fun, but that's okay. You've probably had strained relationships in the past. You've probably had some painful things. You know how to forgive. You know how to work stuff out. You know how to have sweaty palm conversations. You can do that. You can ask for help. You can ask to connect with someone. So how do we put some attention on that? Then as you look at some of the stresses and challenges and goals in your life, some of the uncertainty and change that's going on, I imagine you have some of that, if not quite a bit, especially just given the nature of life these days for most of us. Where can you shift your perspective around those things? Where can you shift your relationship to some of the goals or the stresses? One question that I often pose is, instead of asking, why is this happening to me, ask, why is this happening for me? It's a way to shift into growth mindset. It allows you to shift your relationship to whatever you're dealing with. And again, not to sugarcoat it or minimize it. You might be going through an incredibly stressful time right now. There might be a lot of uncertain circumstances or things that are up in the air or changes that are happening. And you want to be real about that, but also not give all your power away to it. So shifting our relationship to what's happening. It's usually our story about what's happening that really dictates how we feel and how we show up. So what can you do to change the story in a way that empowers you? Again, not Pollyanna, pie in the sky, magical thinking, but to do the work of really shifting mindset and perspective. Not easy, but super important. And then thirdly, what can you do to shift the relationship with yourself so that it's as healthy and positive as possible? You can use that technique that I use in terms of writing down things you're grateful for, writing down things you forgive yourself for. You can also just talk to yourself as if you're talking to someone you love, as Brene Brown likes to say. Another technique that I've talked about here on the show before is just putting your hands on your heart and taking a few deep breaths. Even if you do that for 10 seconds, it actually changes your nervous system, your physiology. It moves you into more of a compassionate place. Talking to yourself in the mirror, Mel Robbins talks a lot about mirror work. Louise Hay's been talking about mirror work for years, even though we lost Louise several years back. But just looking at yourself in the mirror, Mel likes to say, give yourself a high five. Louise used to often talk about using your first name and just saying, hello, Mike, or I appreciate you, Mike. I love you, Mike. You know, you would obviously use your name and not mine, but like that, like, what if you talk to yourself that way? Receiving compliments and appreciation from other humans, something that I talk a lot about as well, is a way of actually nurturing our relationship with ourselves, letting in some of that good stuff, even and especially if we don't agree with them, but just trying it on like, wow, this person values this about me. That's a better opinion than the one I have of myself. Maybe I can take that one on. So much of it's subjective. So it's all about relationships, relationships with others, as leaders, parents, as human beings, team members, at work, at home, relationship with what's going on, the challenges, the goals, the situations, the circumstances, the changes, the uncertainty, and then relationship with ourselves, the hardest and most important one. It's all about relationships. If we remember that, it actually can free us up and we can take back our energy, our attention, our distraction from lots of circumstances and situations. Again, not to minimize or sugarcoat anything, but just to remember, wait, it's about my relationship with myself. It's about my relationship with what's going on. And it's about my relationship with other people. And by the way, if you're struggling right now in any way, you can also lean on the people around you. Because as the name of the show, we're all in this together. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Always appreciate when you do that. Make sure to leave a rating or a review. Follow or subscribe if you haven't already. Love when you leave comments or questions. If you can do that on social media. You can do that on YouTube specifically. In the show notes below, if you're listening to the podcast audio, there's a lot of links where you can connect with me on social and learn more about my work. Best place to do that is at our website, which is mike-robbins.com. There's also some info on YouTube down below as well. Always appreciate you listening and watching. Look forward to connecting with you next time. And remember to bring your whole self to work, to life. Super important. And also remember, we're all in this together. Thanks.